Hello, welcome to this video. So I've been a bit quiet with dreams recently and with creating anything recently, and the main reason why is because I've just been waiting for this new update to drop from Dreams. So the new update is 2.44, and I've been following the Twitch stream with the new features, but one of them that got me excited was the bake to paint feature. And the reason why is because you can get you can convert objects into paint strokes, and then paint strokes, they have settings that you can tweak, and stuff like this you wouldn't have been able to do by, like, you could have done it, but you would have to paint rows of strokes in order to get the result that you see here. But now you just drop in a cube, convert it to a paint stroke, which is made up of a bazillion flecks, add stretch to it, and then add a wave setting to it with heartbeat and all of that, and you can create a pretty believable wave effect, like a shoreline effect. So just a real quick, this is based off of Saku's Mind tutorial, and my mind was just blown when I saw that tutorial and what you could do. Like, basically he placed a bunch of spheres around the scene and then added a wave effect to it. But that got me wondering, like, what would happen if you overlay it and like combine different flecks together with the opacity. So you can adjust the opacity here and also the shininess and all of that stuff. And I just wanted to figure out, like, it got me curious, what kind of effect could you achieve? Like, because I recently went to the beach and I had a little swim, and I'm one of those weird people at the beach that just look at the water for hours and not actually swim or like have fun or anything. I just look at the beach waves for ages and just trying to dissect the movement of it and what makes water look like water. So I wanted to apply all of my observations here. So the water is made up of different layers, so made up of 7 layers in total with different kinds of settings. So here's the foam layers here, but they're basically just made up of one cube, and then I just changed the properties of each one to kind of get different kinds of effects and to get the movement to feel like the waves are overlapping with each other. So these are the distant waves, like the big waves that come to shore. I can't get the big waves yet, but from a distance, that's what this area is simulating. And then when you get closer, when the waves actually crash and roll, it rolls across the water that was before it. So I've gone surfing for quite a bit, and what you want to do is kind of wait for the wave to crash and then kind of overlap of the previous water that's going in. So there's water hitting the shore but going back into the ocean, and then it kind of curls back and crashes back. And what you want to do is wait for that curl and that overlap. And if you are surfing, this is the wave that you want to surf, which is this wave here, and it brings you all the way to the shore. So I've done that quite a few times. And then if you stand on the shore and walk around, and you just stand here, it's kind of like the treadmill effect. Like you just stand in one spot and it looks like you're moving, but you're not. But the water's kind of like getting dragged back into the ocean. So I try to simulate that here with like a few different foam layers. So when the foam reaches the shore, bubbles, they kind of stick to the sand. Just turn off the hover for a second. Like the bubbles, they stick to the sand and then they get dragged back in. So here's a wave kind of going on top, and then there's the water going back in underneath it. So I just wanted to try and have all of that kind of experience with walking along the beach, jogging along the beach, and kind of like surfing in the water and all that. Like all of my memories of being at the beach and how the water is actually moving and stuff. I wanted to try and bring that kind of experience into this, and hopefully it kind of looks realistic because it's based on my actual experience. So I didn't look at video reference or anything to do this. It's just from walking along the beach and experiencing the water and just constantly observing the water and what it's like. So hopefully you can see that kind of wave here. But then it's combined with a foam layer to kind of go in sync with that blue layer. So it looks like it's hitting the shore. So even though there's a lot happening with water and how it like curls and crashes and it gets dragged back in, there's also an overall surface layer on top of all of it, which is the foam layer. And the foam kind of just sticks on top of all of the movement that's happening below. So you have the water kind of crashing, getting pushed back up the sand and then going back in. But then on top of it, there's this foam layer that kind of just rests in that kind of dead zone. So that's what I was trying to do with the different kinds of movements and the settings. So it was just basically placing all of the layers where I want them to go and then adjusting it in a way to kind of get that kind of motion that I wanted with the movement here, with the flow. If you change these settings, it changes the whole thing. So it just takes a bit of tweaking and fiddling around before you get the results that you want. But the main thing you want to keep in mind is that thing that you want to capture. And then you try to tweak the settings so that it registers whatever you're trying to achieve, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I spent ages on this, like hours, just doing that motion that I wanted. So then there's also the translucency of the water that I wanted to get. So basically when the sun goes through the water, it kind of bounces back the sand. So the bounce light goes through the water, but then the light can't really escape the water. So what you get is this greenish aqua kind of bounce light, which is actually the sand bouncing through the water. So to simulate that, what I did was just grabbed a block and spray painted it like half green, like yeah, and that's it. And then what you do is just place it approximately where the foam layers are happening, and that's when the water, and you get that kind of illusion that like the light is going through the water. It's like an old school trick, even used during the PS1 days, when, like Tomb Raider, for example, when Lara Croft is swimming under the water, what they do is just texture the bottom of the pool like green, and it looks like you're underwater. It's like a old video game kind of technique. So once I have the basics in place with the, daytime, then I wanted to see what it looks like at nighttime. So it's pretty much now you're focusing on the light and how it kind of is translucent. Like, how do you make it look like light is going through water? So to do that, I just added a glow to the water. So when the moonlight is shining through the water's gonna glow a little bit and kind of go through. So if you add a glow, not too much because it would be blinding like this, but just enough where it gives that kind of nighttime glow, if you know what I mean. So this is actually inspired by the life of Pi. Like, if you've seen that movie, there's all of these underwater creatures that light up the ocean. So it's kind of like that kind of color palette. So I specifically remember that movie when I was like trying to work on the nighttime lighting. The most common mistake that I see people make in dreams when it comes to nighttime is just placing one light in the scene, and then what the result that you get is something that's pitch black and there's no color or there's no light at all. But that's not exactly how light kind of works. So light is really dynamic, and it depends on the material that light is traveling through or bouncing back. So the ocean is a translucent thing. It's kind of like a bluish kind of color. I'm not sure because it's a clear kind of water. It's water. Water is clear, but then the murkiness of all the bacteria, I'm guessing, creates that kind of blue hue to it. So when the moonlight shines through, the only color that bounces back when the light passes through it is going to be a blue kind of hue. But light travels through the water, it adds a glow, and then what happens when it hits the sand is going to bounce back some light. So even though you have one source, the light has lasers where it bounces through color and bounces through the scene, and it's never going to be pitch black, you know. It's going to bounce back, and once it bounces off the sand and onto the character, the light from the character bounces back to the sand, and then it keeps bouncing like this, and that's how you get a nice kind of light, nighttime lighting. So in Dreams, it does have a kind of bounce light happening. It does kind of simulate bounce lighting, but what you want to do is enhance it with supporting lights to kind of give the bounce, like enhance that bounce light that's already in Dreams. So Dreams already has a kind of bounce lighting happening, but what you can do is add more to kind of accentuate how that light bounces and control how that light bounces. So if you have like a direction, like one source of light going to the sand, what you might want to do is match the color of the sand, which is like right now it's kind of a pink color, but right now it's too harsh. So bounce lighting is very subtle kind of light, like maybe 2% or something like that. And then right there, that's how you can control the amount of light that's being bounced. So right here, if you want the sand to reflect back more light, you have to manually place the light there to kind of simulate that bounce lighting effect. So I don't know how that's working, but I have the bounce lights kind of pinned to the character. So here's the bounce light here, because the character's moving around a lot, and it's going to cost a lot if you put lights around the scene. So we're mainly focusing on the character. So I've pretty much parented the bounce lights to the character. So you get this kind of reflection of the light bouncing back. So when you enter the water, like, and the light is bouncing through the water, it's going to be refracted, and then it will show on the character like this. So there was also some extra tweaking that I did with the nighttime lighting, but it's pretty much the same principle. Like if you did afternoon kind of lighting, it depends on the position of the sun, the color of the sun, and you know, just based on observations that you make in real life being applied. So real life looks more dull than this, so part of creating art is making things hyper real. So in this case, I wanted to make the beach kind of hyper real and not realistic, like it's a fantasy kind of setting. And then, you know, once you have all the lights in place and the color palette in place, you can play with the grade effects. I did this matrixy kind of color grade, and then kind of album art kind of color grade, like Tycho. So one of my favorite artists is Tycho. so I wanted to make it that kind of color palette. So this is a Tycho kind of filter, and this is just like Disney Moana kind of basic kind of light and Life of Pi kind of lighting. So yeah, once you have the environment in place, you can then do the animation like resting, lying down, doing a starfish with L2, R2. It depends on the angle of the ground as well, because he's on a slope. So if you're facing towards the ocean, he's going to do starfish. But then when he stands up and faces like on an uphill slope, it's an entirely different animation. So you can detect the slope with angle sensors, and this is what I used here to detect the angle of the slope in order to do sit-ups from the angle, or crunches or whatever. And then if he is looking towards the ocean, it senses the downward angle and he does the starfish instead. So there is a bit of logic there. This is made with selectors. If you push the L stick, he'll stand up from whatever position he's in. So if he's sitting down, he'll stand right up. Press R3 like a couple of times and he'll still stand back up. So that was quite a bit of blending with the keyframes that you had to do. And I was experimenting also with the new features like FK-IK to try and get the elbows and all of that to work naturally. It uses the real-time kind of clock. So right now it is 12 AM where I am. The only thing that I can't figure out is the dynamic day and night with the sun position. So I tried experimenting with that, but I can't get it to work for some reason. I still don't understand like what's going on there, but again, we're all still learning how to use the tools. But I wanted to like pretty much apply like all of the updates into this creation and just try to create something that uses all of the tools. Oh yeah, there's also the underwater stuff. So if you move the camera under the water, so that's just using a zone that detects the camera, and then I just changed the filter, changed the sound, added some flex to get the underwater effect. I used the ghost kind of filter to kind of simulate that underwater feel. So that's also based on real life experience. So when you go underwater, that's what you kind of see. You just see pretty much nothing, and you get like salt in your eyes, and your eyes go red. So yeah. And then you know, I added some zoom functionality to get that cinematic 35mm kind of look. So yeah, really loving this update. Part of the update as well is that you can add now, blah blah blah, you can now animate zones. So here I have a force applier, but then I've animated the force applier to move with the waves. So when you go into the water, the force is pushing you back. So the force applier is pushing the character back, and that's using an action recorder. There's some other things that I've experimented with the bake to paint. Like I tried cloning the feet and then using bake to paint to create sand that sticks to the feet. But I kind of got rid of it because it kind of started to look weird, like because it's not meant to be realistic. It's a stylized kind of thing. So I think like I had sand sticking to his feet at one point, and if you adjust the start and end points of the flex, you can get the sand to slowly build up onto the feet. So I had that for a little bit, but then that just adds a whole nother bit like complexity to the scene, because when you go into the water you expect it to wash off. Then when you go out of the water you want to see footprints being left behind on the sand, like when you have wet feet, but then it slowly gets dry and then your feet, you know, starts to collect sand. So at some point I want to try and add those effects. Like when he's running he might flick sand behind him or alter the sand or something like that. But you know, the water was already you know, that was my main focus, but those are some other things that I might add later if I figure it out, but it just sounds like overkill right now. But I want to add those little details like later. And there's also the sound design of it as well, like if you enter the water he should be making some splashy footstep noises. Then when he's on the sand it should sound like he's on sand. And I was also thinking, you know, if he's in water, shouldn't there be water splashing when he's running through it? And the answer is kind of yeah, but then another answer is like, that's overkill. So yeah, something that I might want to improve on later in the future is how linear it's looking right now. Like if you look at it from this angle, it looks very linear, and that's not how waves actually function. It looks repetitive as well. But in real life, the waves, they move in a circular motion and they overlap in a circular kind of way. So at one point it moves based on the roughness of the terrain. You know, if the terrain is like bumpy, you're gonna get those bumps in the water as well. Something that it really impressed me about the flex, like, is totally just media molecule being amazing, is how the shadows interact with the flex. So here I'm on the surface, but you can see the shadow of the character is kind of blending with the foam. like is blending with the flex here, and you kind of get this really cool ray tracing kind of effect with the flex. Like you can kind of see the shadow being casted on the fleck there. Like it's a really subtle thing, but I think it looks really cool. Like you can see the shadow on the mist there. Like it's really subtle, but you know, I think that's really cool. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been working on since the update dropped. And the tutorial is from Saku's mind, so I didn't know that water effects were possible until I saw that video. So I highly recommend checking his channel out and checking his tutorial out, because that's pretty much the main basic thing that you need to create a water effect like this. All I did was added foam, more reflective kind of surfaces, and like translucency and all of that, and I controlled the waves in a way so that it kind of emulated what I wanted it to do. So yeah, this update, you know, is blowing my mind so far. So I will see you in the next video. Right now I've just been busy, you know. I want to really complete my Christopher Johnson rig, but part of me as well was just waiting for this update to drop and seeing whether that would change how I rig the character or anything like that. So yeah, always learning the tool and seeing if there's any new things that I can apply, you know.